So these two saws are 11 and a half months apart. So today I'm going to go over what I see after 11 months. I want to see if I can identify if any of the flaws in this one were corrected in this machine. Something that I find curious between these two saws. They were purchased almost a year apart. This one came from wherever Harbor Freight ships them out, it came in the mail. This one I picked up in store. Now the store has been out of these, and when they get them in stock, they don't keep them very long. But when I look at the serial numbers on these two saws, there are only 86 digits between these two saws. So this is the arm that flips down so that you can do miters. It flips down and then this saw hits it. You see how that pushes the screw? So there is all kinds of little slack in here. So here, as you can tell because it's clean, is the new saw. Now this one's a little stiffer, and then see when I push down, you're not getting that deflection. This bolt here is much stiffer. Okay, so I just pulled these off to try to see what the difference was. This is the new one that I just purchased, and you can see there's these little I don't know what kind of washers they're, like a wavy looking washer. Hopefully you can pick that up on camera. This is what was on my original one. You've got just a regular flat washer, and then you got a split washer, which is significantly larger than the bolt. Now these two pieces here, they look the same. I don't see any difference in them, but between this washer and I guess that would make a whole lot of sense, because with the split washer, the it doesn't, or lock washer, they're offset to catch. So when it's going in, it's catching on the one side and is a little bit thicker over here, so it's giving it that play. So, well, 86 ones down the assembly line, I guess they finally found the right box of the right washers. So these saws, I think, actually have a lot of options for the price. These are priced right around where the Chicago Electric were, not too much more, significantly under any kind of DeWalt or Rigid of the sliding compound miter. But that might lead to some newbies that have never owned a miter saw before buying these. If you look over here on the casing, this is actually an arrow, and that is your direction of turn for the blade, which is the opposite of what a table saw turns. So this one comes with this brand new with this installation guide, and a lot of people, I think, just maybe rip that off, because I have had more than one person say that this thing would not even cut a 2x4, how it was a worthless saw. Now if you look at my shop, a lot of this is all hardwood, and I mean, you're seeing these are not a 2x4, but a full 2-inch or more. This one here is probably 2.5 inch. That one's only probably about 6 inches, but most of these slabs are 12 to up to 16 inches across. I cut these hardwood. I mean, I've got cherry here, I've got Purple Heart, which is some super hardwood, and these saws have never had any issue as far as power. what I think is happening is some people are putting the blade on backwards. And if you put the blade on backwards, then this isn't going to cut very well. The other issue maybe is they've got a homeowner's 16 gauge 100-foot extension cord, and it's trying to run this on too small of a gauge wire. Could possibly be bogging it down. I haven't personally got to talk to them to identify what the problem is. Or it could be there's some defective saws out there. I'm not saying that there isn't, because there are some defects that I have found with these saws. But I don't think that there's a sliding miter saw out there that won't cut a 2x4. So if it's these people that are saying that it won't cut a 2x4, if you look at my dust collection video, I took a 2x4 in about 5 minutes and chopped it up into over 100 little pieces just to go over the dust collection. And I was actually stacking. I stacked 2x4s on top of each other and cut two. Sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, I'll put them in front, you know, two in front and two behind, and I'll cut 4 2x4s at one time with this saw. Never had an issue with the power. The other thing I will say while we're at blades is these don't come with blades. And again, they're not the most expensive saw, but they do seem to have a good motor. And now you see this right here. It is a sliding miter saw blade. It has a negative 5-degree hook on the teeth. So a typical, like a combination blade, I'm not sure if this is a 22, but it's got a forward hook on the teeth. So this is a lot more aggressive blade. And now I've used this blade on here for a while, and when I sent it out to get sharpened, I just went ahead and I purchased a sliding miter saw blade. And now any blade, when I first did my first review on this, I used a Delta blade that came with my table saw that was obviously not the best blade in the world, and it cut just as good as, you know, these are the actual Freud blades. The only difference is with this is when I cut with like this sliding miter saw blade here, the smoothness of the cut of the wood, when I pull it out, I can cut cheap plywood and it's got almost a glossy, smooth, perfectly smooth finish on it. So this thing can definitely make some nice smooth cuts. And this particular saw, when I first got it, it was out of square, and I had to square the fence up. And once it took me a couple of tries, and once I got the fence square, all the detents here, whenever you move this around and it locks in, I checked them. And so from one detent to the other, you know, if it says, you know, 45, 50 or whatever, you know, it locks in at, they were all dead on. I used my digital protractor, and it was to a 0.0 of degree. It surprised me at how accurate it was. Okay, so I went to plug this in for the first time, and the wire felt different. Now, you see, this is Vigorous, is the name brand. This is Vigorous Electronics Company. So the wire is from the same company. They're both 300 volt, 90 degree, 14 gauge wire. I don't know if the Wuxi is a part of the Vigorous. This is a UL. This one over here does have UL over here, and it's a C UL. So if somebody knows what some of these numbers mean, this one here has this FT2 on it. So this one on the bottom doesn't have the FT2. So I don't know what the FT2 stands for, but I just find if these saws were made on an assembly line and there's only 86 saws in between them, why did they change the type of wire that they were using from the one to the other? Now this is what I think possibly could be the problem. This is the AC to DC converter for the shadow line. As you can see, this one's all discolored, whereas this one's nice and shiny and new. So I'm not for sure if it's necessarily the shadow line AC diverter or if it's the LED, but I have had more people comment that the shadow line doesn't work on their saw than any other issue. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. So this right here is our AC to DC converter. All right, so if you look at the wires, they just run up to, here's our electrical cord that's plugged in, and you have your white and your black. You know, you got your neutral and your positive, and so they come into this little block, and now they have the same two wires coming back out, except for it turns yellow and goes to our switch, and then it also the black turns into gray. Well, they just have kind of shoved in to the connector here a white and a black wire that goes to our AC to DC converter. So that means that if this saw is plugged in, our AC to DC converter has power to it. So if you're like me, I keep this primarily in my shop, and if it's in my shop, it's plugged in. And if I don't come out here for 4 or 5 days, you know, heck, I may be on vacation and don't come out here for a week or two. This thing is plugged in 24/7, and so our AC to DC converter is always hot. And as you see, when I test it right here coming out to the DC voltage, I got 14 volts DC coming out. So on this older board here, I do the same test, and come on now, give me some voltage here. There we go, 10.7 volts, 10.6 volts. When I first plugged this in, I was getting 11 volts. Now it's been plugged in here for about 15-20 minutes now, and I've already got almost a half a volt droppage. So I don't know, maybe I should leave this plugged in a little bit longer and check it, because whenever I replaced my LEDs on this one, thinking it was a bad LED, I only had like 3 volts. All right, so if you're watching this, I'm sorry, because that means that you've had to listen to all my ramblings for the last too many minutes, way too long. I just felt responsible because so many people has watched my video. I literally have tens of thousands of views on my other reviews, and this saw has let me down to an extent. So it's overall a really good saw. However, the shadow line on this thing is powered 24/7 if it's plugged in. So if you got it in your garage or in your shop, you live in a hot area, the thing's overheating, and it seems like it's dropping voltage and no longer performing properly. And that shows, as that is the #1 complaint people contact me with, is that their shadow line has stopped working. That I put out a little video where I had replaced my LED because my shadow line has stopped working, and I forget, I haven't looked at how many thousands of views I've had to that video, so that tells me there's a lot of people that's having this issue. So there was some issues I found with the assembly process from the factory, which fixed, made the saw a better saw. All miter saws have poor dust collection. I have on mine added in, you know, a little piece of plastic here. It made a little zero clearance insert, and the saw works great. Really have a hard time justifying spending any money to upgrade the saw. It's working for everything that I ever wanted to do. The only thing that is really disappointing to me about it is that the shadow line is defective. Because if it wasn't a factory defect or a design flaw, you wouldn't have this many people that are having issues with it. And so if there is a defect or a design flaw, you would think that, one, they would address it, because from this one to this one, a year apart, they still have the same wiring defect where they've got this DC converter wired 24/7, so it's sitting on power to it while it's sitting out in your garage if the saw's plugged up, and in a hot environment it's burning up. So just keep that in mind. If you get one of these, I would try to maybe unplug it, or what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the wire from the power, run that to the switch, and then when I turn my switch off, it shuts off the power to the AC to DC converter, and then that probably will eliminate any problems on this newer saw. With that being said, I appreciate you watching me. Hopefully one day I'll get some subscribers and it will justify me spending more time on these videos, and I can actually get them to look a little bit more professional. But anything you see on my video is exactly what I'm thinking, and I appreciate every one of you here watching this.